They are targeting people, including medical teams as well as Arab speakers. At this moment, we are hearing from Reuters that is reporting that Israel, it says its forces are carrying out an operation against Hamas in Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital, and they are targeting people, including medical teams as well as Arab speakers. They are also saying that Israel is calling on all Hamas operatives in the hospital to surrender at this point.
That's the video, guys. Welcome back to my channel. We all know that this is a big media house. Like, BBC is really a big media house. I mean, how then can they make such a big mistake? We also know how Israel is. They are also big. Not so long ago, we were talking about them being in control of the media and whatnot. So with that background, we can only wonder if really it was a mistake or it was deliberate. Maybe they were meant to say that, but it is what it is. And the way they announced it, they were obviously meant to apologize publicly. I'm not just getting it, guys, but something seems fishy. Now, talking about them apologizing, here's the BBC apology video. Check it out. I will be right back.
And now an apology from the BBC. BBC News, as it covered initial reports that Israeli forces has entered Gaza's main hospital. We said that medical teams and Arab speakers were being targeted. This was incorrect and misquoted a Reuters report. We should have said IDF forces included medical teams and Arabic speakers for this operation. So we apologise for this error, which fell below our usual editorial standards. The correct version of events was broadcast minutes later.
Guys, I'm not the only one that had an opinion on this. Let's hear what other people thought about this.
Dear BBC, at first I thought about maybe suggesting a new tactic, like figuring out your sources and then figuring out the truth and then talking about it. But after thinking about it for just another second, I realized that if you keep on acting like a crazy impulsive adolescent that hears a rumor on social media and then posts it for the entire world to see and then apologizes and takes it back, well, then maybe soon enough, everyone in the world is going to realize that Israel is actually the adult in this relationship. So thank you for your work.
This one is for the BBC. Oops, we did it again. We played with the facts without any shame.
It covered initial reports that Israeli forces has entered Gaza's main hospital. We said that medical teams and Arab speakers were being targeted. This was incorrect and misquoted a Reuters report.
We're BBC, yeah, oops, you think we're objective, but we are selective.
So we apologise for this error.
We're not that innocent.
So I just want to know, as someone who spent 2 years during the pandemic working for the BBC, reporting a documentary, where I had to go through a very rigorous fact-checking, verification process for anything that we would publish in any of our scripts. I just would like to know, as someone who worked with the BBC on a very, very dangerous documentary, which required so many steps of approval. I can't even begin to show you the emails and the messages on WhatsApp, the sensitivities, trying to take into consideration harm done to our sources. I would just like to know how the BBC allows for this to happen. And I would like to put it in a context in which NBC News did a Twitter thread that exposed them as peddling disinformation without sources. NPR aired a 10-minute interview with Benjamin Netanyahu as he completely lied and did not misinformation or false information, as I and many others have been accused of repeatedly publishing false information on this very platform. All of these news organizations are peddling, including CNN with Sarah Sidner at the beginning, who was the originating source, one of them, of the 40 beheaded babies story, including Clarissa Ward. And I'm not trying to name and shame, but these are huge news organizations with deep pockets, and they have a lot of years of experience and entire teams of fact checkers to verify information. Now, as a journalist, as someone who studied journalism, who's practiced journalism, and who makes mistakes like all journalists, I would just like to understand, is this a mistake that the BBC published? Is it a mistake for NPR's Steve, I forget the journalist's name, who interviewed Netanyahu as he continued to make claim after claim that had been debunked and disproven on this platform and in the mainstream media. I would just like to ask my fellow colleagues, I would just like to ask you to not just sweep this under the bus, but to take a serious look into the mirror and to really question, what are you doing and why are you doing it? Is this intentional? And if it is, why? How is it that this platform that claims to, I am grateful for those at Facebook and at other social media friends of mine inside, and by friends I mean people who care about accuracy and fairness and who really believe that there is a public need to know, but how is Netanyahu as a political state actor protected? How is he protected to speak on NPR? How can NPR publish that and not get flagged as repeatedly publishing false information? I am angry because I am ashamed. I am angry because I am ashamed of the state of journalism in light of not just genocide in Gaza, but in light of the incredible disproportionate power dynamics, which is the reality on the ground, in light of the obvious media blackout and the attempts to disseminate disinformation. This is all allowed, and yet it is us, independent journalists, others, voices, activists, actors, artists who are speaking out, who are, because of our humanity, we are trying to dig deep and we are trying to be fair and we are trying to understand what the hell is going on here. And I know I sound unprofessional, but I'm pissed off, and it is not unprofessional to be pissed off about knowingly patterns in the media of knowingly disseminating information that is directly coming, or indirectly, but more often than not directly coming from a state actor. Just because Israel is a state and Hamas, the resistance movement of the Palestinian people whose land was occupied in 1948, Palestine was a state under the British mandate. The BBC should be ashamed of how transparent, and I have friends and colleagues who work there. I have people who I have cried with, who I have spoken to, and I'm not saying that there are not some people who do good work at any of these news organizations, but that is not the problem. The problem is that the media is not only implicated and complicit in the genocide, it is disgracefully irresponsible, not just in how it writes headlines and it erases Palestinians, it dehumanizes them in the ways that it uses certain terminology to humanize Israelis despite genocide and ethnic cleansing that causing. It is shameful that this is something that we have to wake up every day, in addition to enduring and seeing our brothers and sisters, humans, brothers and sisters, not just because we're Palestinians or Arabs. These are brothers and sisters of our human race. We are all worthy of basic dignity and respect. Put the politics aside for a second and ask yourself, why are you being lied to by so many news platforms? And why is the truth only available on social media despite the deliberate censorship?
I've known BBC to be accurate with news, but how could they have made that mistake? Unless if it's almost the truth. And honestly, because we know what's going on, I feel like they were forced to make that apology. I mean, the reporter couldn't have made that mistake. There's just absolutely no way. With what is happening right now, this issue is very sensitive and people really need accurate information. Now, this forced me to search about BBC, how accurate their news is, and here is what I found out. The BBC is under scrutiny. Here's what research tells us about its role in the UK. It is the most widely used source of news in the UK. It has lower reach among the young and the less formally educated. With the BBC and other public service media facing increased political and public scrutiny and a number of different challenges, this is a good time to take stock about what research can tell us about the role of the BBC and public service news in the UK. Now, the challenges facing the BBC include intense scrutiny for its coverage of Brexit, domestic politics, and more, with frequent allegations of bias, internal issues over gender pay gaps, coverage of controversial issues like climate change and artisanship, and disagreements over where the lines of due impartiality should be drawn. Discussions about the current funding model, a dramatic ongoing disruption of the entire media sector as audiences embrace digital, mobile, and platform-dominated media environment where international commercial competitors like Facebook, Google, and Netflix Netflix play more important role. Now, many domestic media face strong commercial headwinds as they face far more intense competition for attention, consumer spending, and advertising. The public's use and the perception of the BBC is that by far the most widely used source of news in the UK, both online and offline, and it is one of the most highly trusted sources of news. It is also more widely used as a source of news than many of its peers among other public service media. According to the BBC itself, it also reaches more than 400 million people globally with news every week. The BBC is very widely used across the political spectrum. It is the most popular source of news among both Conservative and Labour voters and among both Leave and Remain voters. Similarly, the UK's independent communications regulator Ofcom has found that large majorities of audiences in the UK value public service media providers like the BBC very highly for providing trustworthy news programs that help people understand what is going on in the world. Though the BBC is slightly less trusted by people who identify with the political right than by people in the center and on the left, it is still as trusted on the right as major conservative newspapers. The combination of wide reach and a politically diverse audience suggests that public service broadcasting can contribute to cross-cutting exposure to different views, ensuring people see more diverse news and reduce the gap in cross-cutting exposure between the most and least politically engaged individuals, as other researchers have shown. Now, when asked how they thought each news outlet covered the 2019 election generally, 43% of the survey respondents said the BBC had done a good job, a higher score than any other news outlet in the country. However, only 14% said they thought it had done a bad job, which was also among the highest. Now, while it is widely used, the BBC has somewhat lower reach among younger people and people with more limited formal education. Like other public service media and unlike some commercial media, its news audience thus tends to skew towards older people and those with higher levels of education. Now, similarly, Ofcom has found that while BBC News has maintained its reputation among most people for trusted and accurate reporting, it is seen by some as representing a palm-color, middle-class and London-centric point of view that is not relevant to their lives. Now, after all this background check, it just shows that the BBC is really a big media house trusted by a lot of people. So them saying that they made a mistake and later apologizing for it is still not sitting well with me. I don't know, but yeah. But this is just my opinion anyway, so feel free to share your own thoughts as well. Thank you for watching and see you in my next video.